What's up, disciples? It's Zach Zender, co-host of The Red Letter Disciple. Be joined in a minute with my co-host, Chris Johnson. And we have a mission on this podcast to challenge you, you, to be the greatest disciple of Jesus that you can be. Because we believe that when we all live as great disciples, we show the world who the real Jesus is. And that just might change the world. I'm excited about today's guest. His name is Sam Black, and he is the author of The Healing Church, What Churches Get Wrong About Pornography and How to Fix It. We're actually interviewing Sam during the week of his book launch. And so it's pretty awesome to work on something like this and finally see it launch. So we're talking to him. He's a little tired probably this week, but it was an awesome conversation. Sam's been working with Covenant Eyes, which is an awesome organization for almost 2 decades as they help people find freedom through battling and overcoming pornography. So we're going to find Sam. He's got a story to tell. He's got a background in this, not just with this story, but almost 20 years of being with Covenant Eyes. And I really believe it's one of the more helpful podcast recordings we've had up to this date, because pornography is a major struggle. So many are stuck, and it's not something we talk about nearly enough as we probably ought to. And here's what you're going to find. God has freedom for us. And I think that's a perfect message for us on this 4th of July. Let freedom ring. We're all about freedom today. So even with our sponsor, Red Letter Living, one of the resources that Red Letter Living has created is called Forgiving Challenge. And at the end of Forgiving Challenge, what is the goal of the entire 40-day challenge? That you would experience the freedom that God has for you. And so we talk about freedom today in the episode with Sam, and we'd love for you to not just hear about it on a 1-hour podcast episode, but rather go through a 40-day journey to not only learn how to forgive others, but to truly receive God's forgiveness for your life. And that's where real freedom comes from. And so, pastors, we'd love to partner with your church for a 40-day challenge. Fall is coming up shortly, and Forgiving Challenge is a perfect resource that's going to help you and your church go deep and explode with real freedom. This 40-day challenge dives into what is God's forgiveness really like? Because once you're forgiven by God, you truly are free. Churches, we've launched a 40-day challenge in more than 1,000 churches worldwide. And we know that not only will this particular one bring freedom to your people, but we know it will also grow your small groups by more than 40%, bring unity in a time when there's a lot of division, and it'll also provide you 6 weeks of done-for-you materials that's going to make a difference. So to find out more about Forgiving Challenge, you can go to forgivingchallenge.com. Pastors, if you want a free copy, just email our team at hello@redletterchallenge.com. We would love to work with you. So with all of that said, it's time for the episode with Sam Black. Let's do this. All right, well, this is going to be a really helpful episode today. We've got author Sam Black in the house. Sam is the author of The Healing Church. Brand new book just came out. What Churches Get Wrong About Pornography.
Which is everything.
And how to fix it. So I'm curious about how to fix it as well. So excited about that. So Sam, if you're asking about who is Sam, he's the director of recovery education. Sam joined the Covenant Eyes team, an awesome team doing a great thing in 2007 after 18 years as a journalist, and has now edited 16 books on the impact of pornography, speaks at parents, men's, leaders events, passionate about helping Christians live free from pornography. And as he walks his own grace-filled journey, he gets to help others on their journey, and that's why he's here today. So welcome, Sam, to the Red Letter Disciple.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Good to see you, Zach.
And this will air a little bit after than obviously when we record it, but we're actually recording in book launch week for you.
That's right.
So,
yes.
hey, talk to me a little bit. We've got some content creators out there of like what all has gone into book launch for you and your team.
Oh my goodness. Are you from the beginning or just from the book launch itself?
Wherever you want to go with it.
It is, it's been a tremendous experience to travel the country, interview more than 70 ministry leaders, pastors, counselors, to learn how churches are doing this work well.
Yeah.
And when you discover what we're doing well, then we can talk about, well, there's some things we can improve on. It's pretty easy to poke, but it is harder to actually go about, find those churches that are doing this work well, and then lean into that. Yeah. And so putting this book together was a difficult lift. It really was. After interviewing more than 70 people for it,
Wow.
I did read. I found more than 70 books during the process of this, and yeah, it was. And then when we comes to launch, this is a first for Covenant Eyes. We've produced a lot of ebooks, but this is our first actual book where you can buy it at wherever you normally buy books online.
Well, congratulations.
Yeah.
I know what goes into creating material like this, and it's an exciting week when it's finally available.
It
and
is.
just holding it is like, it's so amazing getting that
Yes.
first book in the mail. And what I really love about your book is, man, it's going to help a lot of people. And so blessings on this week for you, and obviously the future with Healing Church. And so I want to kind of circle back a little bit though, and just from the beginning, like, talk to me, why is this topic so important to you that you would not just write a book about it, but really it seems like you've spent your career devoted to helping others overcome pornography. So talk to me about why that would be important to you.
Well, I had to go through my own recovery journey, and I've experienced this and experienced what it felt like to hide within the church, and then to find a church that was very safe and created an opening for me to begin a journey to walk and learn to live in freedom. And that was, again, it wasn't an overnight experience. It was a journey for me where I was discipled, where I got to be held in place long enough for the great physician to do his work in my life. And so as I traveled with Covenant Eyes over 16 years, I found over and over again the repeated mantras that really weren't working for men and women, boys and girls, teens that were being stuck in pornography. They were constantly asking the same questions that I asked. Why did I stay here? Why can't I break free? Why do I keep coming back? How could I really take a real journey toward freedom? And knowing many of the answers there and hearing some not great solutions from ministry leaders who had the best intentions, who wanted to help people find freedom, well, I wanted to help them. It was truly through, I feel, a movement of the Holy Spirit in my own heart that really pushed me forward and said, Sam, instead of just saying, hey, they need to do a better job, show them what works, show them other churches that are doing this work well so they can model after those other churches. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. Other churches have already done this work.
It's great. And so the book is entitled The Healing Church, What Churches Get Wrong About Pornography and How to Fix It. And so I do want to get to the church side of it, but first I want to talk about individuals, see and to catch kind of how big or what kind of an issue this is today. And so our podcast, Red Letter Disciple, the goal is to challenge every person to be a greater disciple of Jesus where they are. And so it seems that discipleship and this topic are really related.
Absolutely.
I think that we can be the greatest disciples if we're struggling with pornography. And so talk to us about how does pornography hinder us from being the greatest disciples we can be? What are the things it's doing to us that's harmful?
Oh, wow. Well, it impacts your mind, body, and spirit. And it is impacting, that people get stuck. I guess that's a great place for us to start. How do people get stuck? Because that will kind of outline some more of why it's such a pernicious trap. It is first early exposure, long before children often know what pornography is or know the basics of sex. They're seeing graphic pornography today. In 2007, we released the first iPhone. Before that, we had the iPad, and we have been walking around with pornography in our pockets for a long time. And even before then, pornography was pretty available to many children. And so depending on which study you're looking at, the average age for first exposure is somewhere between the ages of 8 and 12. And that you ask just about any adult who's trapped within the stronghold of pornography, and they can likely tell you a story about the first time that they saw pornography. They don't remember anything else about that day, but they can literally tell you a story about that first exposure. The second part of this, so first is early exposure. Number two is a repetition. And we know that adolescents and teens are among the most prolific users of pornography. And if that neural shock to the brain, where dopamine is a big ingredient for memory, and so it's hard for a child to look away. And then norepinephrine helps burn those neural pathways in the brain, those emotional experiences, and that's why people don't forget. So that number 2, though, is that repetition, the ongoing use, which builds neural pathways in the brain that begin craving it more and more.
Yeah.
The third part of this is some drama or trauma, especially early in life, but it can happen elsewhere, where pornography becomes not just something that feels good and is exciting. It becomes something to anesthetize emotions and bad feelings. It's used to regulate their moods. And that was true in my own life. Listen, I lead a newcomers meeting for a group called the Samson Society. You can find them at samsonsociety.com. And it is a community of Christian men who are working and supporting one another to overcome something in their life that's bigger than they are. And for the most part, it's pornography and unwanted sexual behaviors. And I hear the same story over and over again, and it sounds just like my story. The early exposure, the ongoing repetition through especially adolescence, and the drama or trauma that they were used, that happened in their life. And after enough experience with pornography, it became a tool, an escape, and that escapism becomes so impactful on our mind, body, and spirit.
Yeah. And as that cycle keeps going, right, it fills people that are in the grips of it with not just guilt, but then shame and
lies that we can't possibly, I don't think what God teaches us and the Bible, it can be true, because how can I possibly live that way? I don't think I can really live without pornography. Won't I? And don't we hear this taught in the church, that we'll always have this ongoing struggle with, and what we need is to not only tackle the issue, knowing that we have been harmed, we have been corrupted, our mind, body, and spirit have been harmed by pornography and corrupted by pornography. So we need a mind, body, spirit experience to take a journey in discipleship to escape pornography as well.
Hey, Sam, Chris Johnson here. I wanted to, this is so compelling to me, and I'm so glad that you're here, because, I mean, you know the stats better than I do, but there are a lot of people who are addicted to pornography, and I've worked in youth ministry for 20 years. And this is what I saw at the beginning. At the beginning, 20 years ago, it was generally just young men coming to me who earnestly wanted to break the habit.
Right.
Now, what I've seen in the last few years, young women coming to me, whereas I don't know, like, if they were always involved in it or now they're more open about it, but I seem to see almost as many young women struggling with it as young men.
All of our data is really outdated for this. All the surveys are outdated. But even the most recent data shows that 14% of women are saying they're watching pornography multiple times a week.
Okay.
And so but I have heard often from, just individuals saying, well, I think it's much more prolific among girls and young women my age. And I hear that from them, right? And I believe that has a lot to do with that early exposure that we've never seen girls have before. And so let me take you to an event where I was speaking, and a 15-year-old girl brought her parents to our table and says, hey, I brought my dad here to sign up for Covenant Eyes because when I was 8 years old, I heard some boys say some words that I didn't understand. And so I asked my dad for his phone. And of course, because he believes in my innocence, that I would never be curious like he was curious. Most kids are curious. I looked up what those words, and that was the first time that I was exposed to pornography on my dad's phone. And so I would go back to that. I was so drawn to it. And I would ask for my mom and my dad for their phones. And I would just continue to go back again and again and again and again on a regular basis. They never even caught on to this until about 2.5 years later. And that's when they were able to discover it by accident and began to provide me some help. And she then grabs up a whole bunch of Covenant-ized flyers and says, hey, I've got so many of my friends who are struggling too. It sounds incredible, right? That so many of our girls are also being exposed. And I think parents have missed an opportunity here because they're afraid that if they say anything about pornography, then it will just make them curious. And what I hear from professionals in this field over and over again, and I found it true as well, that when we equip and train our kids, they become more resilient to pornography and not more curious.
So,
and go ahead. Yes.
No, well, you brought up a really good point, and this is my $1 million question, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but my $1 million question is exactly that. How do we equip? How do we equip? Besides, I know Covenant Eyes is a good tool, accountability is a good tool, but like, how do we I have an 18-year-old girl and I have a 15-year-old boy, right? And we've got all the filters, we've got Bark, we've got Covenant Eyes, we've got everything. But outside of that, like, I also know that my kid is way smarter and has a ton of besides his phone, he's got the iPad, he's got the other computer, he's probably got something I don't even know. How do we equip our kids so that they don't have this lifelong battle with this incredibly powerful, addictive product?
Well, let me tell you the first thing you don't do, and that is you don't shame a child or a teen when you've discovered they've been using pornography.
Okay.
If you want to teach them to hide, shame them. Shame and secrecy is part of that revolving cycle that keeps pushing people back into pornography. So shame is off the table. You'll never shame a child enough, a teen enough to stop using pornography. Just won't happen. In fact, you'll do the opposite.
Sam,
what we want, go ahead.
Before you move forward, because I do want to hear what you're going to say, but what is it? So we don't want to shame them, but what does that mean? Because like, do we punish? Like, is punishing them, shaming them? What do you mean by that? Don't shame them.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, thank you. So shame, whatever its impact is to create a negative feeling and emotion about who they are. You are a dirty person. I can't believe you would do that. What I thought better of you than that. And so that shaming, there's nothing wrong with saying, son, daughter, I want you to know. And maybe I'll just have the conversation right here with you.
Just pretend that Zach did it and he's your son.
Zach.
Feels weird, but go for
ahead.
it.
Yeah, why not, right? So, Zach, I just want to let you know that I love you. And I want you first to know that I need to apologize to you. I am sorry that you were exposed to pornography, and I haven't had a conversation with you about this, and I should have done this a long time ago. And I didn't know exactly what I should say, but I've recently learned that I should have been communicating with you about this for a long time. And so, first of all, please forgive me for not equipping you for the day that you would see pornography. I should have prepared you for this day. And I just thought I could put it off, and that was the wrong choice on my part. So I'd really like for us to continue having a conversation about why pornography can be so impactful on your life, why it can truly impact your brain, impact your future relationships, impact your relationship with God, yourself, and others. And so I know I'm sounding like I'm preaching, but listen, I think we really should take some time and talk about this. And I know you're probably having a bit of angst about that. And I just don't want you to have that. Now, I'm going to set aside our devices right now and set those aside for now, and let's not use them. Okay. And let's just give ourselves a little break from that. And I'm going to do it too. I'm not going to use social media. I'm not going to use my computer. I'm not going to use my phone for anything except some basic business I have to do to put food on the table. But tomorrow, I just want us to take a break right now and come back and talk about this. And then tomorrow, hey, Zach. Hey, I know. having a slushie is like one of your favorite things to do.
He loves that cherry.
So I brought some cherry slushies for us.
It's fantastic.
And I'd just like for us to sit and talk for a little bit. And I've done a little research, and I know there's going to be some information here, but I just want you to understand how this can be impactful for you.
That's good.
So wait a second. Wait, time out. When do you what age can you have that? I mean, that is a very good conversation. I like how you you accept the blame. You're like, I should have had this conversation with you. And that's classic parenting. I don't know how your parents handled it, but
not that way.
The B talk was like some stupid book at 15 after my buddies had already talked about it,
Yeah.
I like how you accept the blame on that. But honestly, Sam, are you saying that you can have that conversation with an 11-year-old if they were exposed to pornography? Or is this what age are you thinking here?
You should have that kind of conversation when your child is exposed at 5, 6, 7.
Oh, wow. Okay. Right? Okay. Good. That was my question. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Right. So when your children are old enough to talk, they need to know the correct name for their body parts. They need to be able to identify that, because so many times when children are describing sexual abuse, they can't describe what was touched or what happened, right? Because we add nicknames and stuff that don't make any sense at all, right?
Right.
And so we need to equip our kids to help protect themselves.
Okay, so don't shame them.
Don't shame them.
But it's
and let me I'm going to walk you through this. This is beautiful. Please. So we're starting with
we're both dads. We both deal, So go ahead.
There is a great book, and I don't get any credit for this. I don't get any kickback on this. I'm just recommending this book. It's called Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior, and Good Pictures, Bad Pictures. Buy that if you're a pastor. Set aside this in your budget to buy a copy for every family in your church. So Good Pictures, Bad Pictures Junior is a read-along book. And it helps them understand what good pictures are, like pictures of their family and their pets. And as you're reading the book, they all go on vacation and they go to the beach where they discover where their bathing suit, we wear our bathing suits to the beach. They're digging in the sand and all that kind of stuff. And, our bathing suit area is to cover our areas that should be private. And we don't show those others because that would be inappropriate. We don't want to show our private areas. So we want to make sure our bathing suit area is covered. And if you see an image or video where the bathing suit isn't covered, that's pornography. And when you see that, you can turn, run, and tell. You turn away, you run and tell. Now Chris, you're looking at me like, Sam, I don't know if this can handle. So I was at an event for the second year in a row. And a mom comes booking up to my table. I mean, she's yelling from the other side of the auditorium. She's running toward me and she says, Sam, I had to come talk to you. I had to come let you know what happened. My 7-year-old was just exposed to pornography. And she's like, I'm hoping I'm not going to be hit by a purse. And I do tell this story within the book, right?
Right.
And I say, okay, well, what happened? She goes, well, my 7-year-old son was at my neighbor's house, and their 7-year-old boy had just received an iPad for his birthday. And he takes this iPad and he puts it in my son's face and says, look what I found. Now, this is so common of child to child exposure because they don't understand what's going on. They can feel like these emotions that they've never felt, but they know that maybe maybe they shouldn't be doing this, but because they're seeing adults and they've been rushed out of the room for whatever TV show is on. And this is much more than that, right? So this boy shows us, but the boy who's been trained, who's been having the ongoing conversation to identify his body parts, to have this ongoing comfortable conversation, to do a read-along book, looks at his friend, puts his hand up in front of the screen and says, no, that's pornography. And he turns, he gets up and runs home and tells his mom and dad what happened. They're excited. They say, oh, we're so proud of you. Thank you for doing exactly what you're told. You just we just can't imagine what a courageous young boy you are, heaping praise on him. But they let the other parents know what happened, right?
That kid got in some trouble, didn't he, Zach? No, but that's amazing. That's an amazing story.
So we're story's not done yet.
Oh.
So the other parents are like, I never think that my child would be curious like I was curious at that age, right? We've all been curious. That's just a natural thing. But with a little more investigation, they discovered their child has exposed 7, 8, 9, and 11-year-olds throughout the neighborhood to pornography. The only child who has said anything is the child who is trained.
Oh my gosh.
All the other children keep it their secret.
Yeah.
Maybe
they're afraid they're going to get in trouble or something like that.
They're shocked. They're embarrassed. It's their little secret, you know? So we need to equip and train our kids, not for if they're going to be exposed, but for when.
Right.
I can't tell you the number of times that I've talked to moms and dads says, pornography introduction happened on my watch, in my kitchen, in my living room, in the backseat of my car. When I handed my phone over the car to pacify my kids so they could play a game, suddenly they were talking in the back, and just by accident, I discovered that they were viewing pornography.
Right.
In the back seat of the car while on the vacation trip. This happens over and over and over again.
So you bring up how easy and how accessible everything is. I've been working with also some men recently who have been struggling, and they said to me, hey, Chris, like, the problem is I'll go on social media, right?
Yeah.
And I had no intention to like surf porn, but then I see an image like on Twitter, which is almost pornography, or Instagram. And then they just like, they're one click away at all times. And thinking about my own experience with this, when I was in college, right? Like it was a lot tougher to get pornography. You had to be intentional. You had to go to the CD store and go buy a magazine or a tape. And like, it was so much effort. It almost discouraged you from even doing it. Right.
Sure.
Now, like you said, we're carrying this around in our pocket. We're one click away. And our kids have that same power.
And it is so, if something exists in the world, pornography has been created out of it. The depravity that has gone across everything you've never even imagined is there. So I don't really talk about all the things that some people talk about the individual genres and what's going on. I just don't think it matters. Right. What really matters is Jesus said, if you look on a woman with lust, that's pornography to you. Right. You committed adultery in your heart. Right. So whether it is these qualifiers of this is pornography or this is not pornography doesn't matter to me.
Right. You're looking with lust and you're already hooked.
That's right. Yeah. And so how many older men have I talked to that said the JCPenney catalog that came in the mail or the Victoria's Secret catalog that came in later years, that was their childhood pornography. Right. So we condition our hearts, minds, and brains with our hearts, minds, and spirit with pornography, and we reap very difficult circumstances. We create a cage of our own making, and we lay it block by block and bar by bar, and we lock the key to the door. We lock the lock, and we throw away the key. And by the way, nobody keeps the key. And Zach, Chris, what I need is for you to come alongside me and help me open that door, because left to my own devices, I will talk about how much I want to escape pornography, and I might set up some little window dressing on my bars, but I'm still stuck.
Right.
I'm just stuck. I need you to walk alongside me and give me some safe discipleship with a safe process that helps me take one step at a time toward a life that lives in true and total freedom. And I want you to know that's a real thing.
Yeah.
Now, listen, left to my own devices, I will maybe, you come over there and you help me take that first step, but I don't stick to that process. I don't stick to the discipleship. I want to go, we had that nice prayer and we had that Bible study that we did, and we did that little thing for a little while. But I'm not really healed. And so I go back to what is familiar.
Yeah.
I'll go back to my own understanding versus God's understanding of what he wants in my life. And I can wear a hole in the middle of my cage, just trying harder and harder. Maybe I can set up some filtering or some accountability software, but what I also need is to understand, how did I get here? Why do I seem to stay here? And how can I begin breaking free? And there's a brand new app from Covenant Eyes called the Victory app by Covenant Eyes. There's more than 30 courses in there with audio as well. And it walks you through that understanding, because understanding precedes, or knowledge precedes understanding, and understanding precedes change. And when we get a better understanding of, why do I keep coming back? Why do I seem to stay stuck here? How can I really begin breaking free? And Chris, Zach, you're walking along with me. You're reading that material as well. And now there's a deeper understanding. Oh, there's a real brain chemistry going on. So maybe I need to really take a break from my phone, even if it takes going to a flip phone.
Right. Yeah. Right? I've seen people do that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you set some things in place. And when I've had a bad day and I come home and I've used pornography, and you go, "Hey, Sam, what happened?" And I go, "Well, I had a bad day and I just got angry and I used pornography." Anger is a common trigger.
Yeah.
A halt is one of those common phrases that people say: hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Those are common triggers for pornography or alcohol or any number of things. But Chris, you're smarter than that. And you've been reading the material in the Victory app, and you say, "Oh, Sam, let's go a little deeper than just you being, having a bad day. What happened?" "Oh, my boss yelled at me and I got upset." And well, okay, well, what'd that feel like? "Oh, well, I felt like, when I was a kid and my dad would yell at me and shame me. And I was okay. So you need to identify that then. So the next time you have a conflict and you feel that emotion that I don't have self-worth, I doubt myself, I'm angry, name that, call that out, and then call me. "Hey, Chris, I'm feeling really angry and upset. I'm feeling a little triggered." And now through that, we're going to make a different decision, a different way to manage my moods, manage my bad feelings, rather than being trapped in this cycle of shame where I try really hard for a while. I've got a coin around here somewhere. I keep it on my desk just for this kind of thought. But on one side of the coin is, I'm going to try harder. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to stay away from pornography. And then after so long, I can only keep that perfectionism up so long. And I flip that coin because I get triggered with being what I call C triggers, or SEE, social, emotional, or environmental triggers. And maybe I saw something on the internet and that just kind of prompted that stinking thinking in my head. And then I act out with pornography. And then I feel this horrible shame about it.
Right.
What I call self-hatred at my expense. Shame, self-hatred at my expense.
That's good.
And then after, I wallow in that shame for a while, then I'll get back on track and I'll try harder. We need to break this cycle. We need to lean on each other. And that discipleship process really does more than just simply say, let's read scripture a little more and let's say a prayer, because those are vital. I don't want to downplay that at all. That is super valuable. But understanding that I didn't get here overnight, and I'm not going to break free overnight. And Christ is asking me to take a journey with the body of Christ, to lean on one another. James 5:16 tells us to confess our sins to one another and pray for one another that we may be healed. But we have a really tough time of doing that in the church. And we have to ask ourselves, what part of James 5:16 do we not believe?
Right. Yeah, it's good. So I want to talk through, I heard a couple things in there so far with, we talk about how to get, how we've gotten stuck and that cycle we can get in, but how then we can break free. And so the two things that you have touched on a little bit, first is like the neuroplasticity side of it. So the brain stuff, I want to talk through that. but then
Yeah.
also you talk in your book about the power of allies. And so I want to get to there too. But first, walk me through the neuroplasticity side, which can be towards our detriment, or it also
Yeah.
can be towards our benefit, right? And we've
Right.
already kind of talked about the detriment side of the cycle, and you creating these triggers and these systems that you just get caught up in it, and it's the same cycle, and so you find yourself there. There is a way, though, that same neuroplasticity can help us. Is that true?
Absolutely. That's absolutely true. God designed our brains, and so often we want to just spiritualize this, over spiritualize it, I should say. But we have to understand that God designed our bodies. And remember that early exposure we were talking about?
Mhm.
Well, that brain has that part, the feeling part of that brain, of that young brain, is very well developed, and yet you notice that children can be very expressive and happy or sad, or they have trouble controlling their emotions sometimes. That's because that feeling brain is working well. But the prefrontal cortex of the brain, the decision making, the executive functioning of the brain, doesn't fully develop until the late 20s. So when a child sees that pornography, it lights up the feeling and emotional states of the brain. The dopamine gives a little spritz of something that feels good. Dopamine also focuses your attention. And so when you talk about brain plasticity, it works in combination with that. We used to think, plasticity simply means that the brain is more plastic than it is ceramic. Mm-hmm. It used to be thought that when you got to a certain age, that your brain was just hardened and it would never change. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Mm. But what neuroscientists have shown us is that we can actually learn new habits throughout our lifetime, even into old age, and new behaviors, etc. So when we are entering this sphere, we understand that the brain was formed with some pornography at an early age, and now we have to do some work to focus on good, healthy, God-pleasing habits, ignore these sinful habits, and God begins to renew the mind. Yeah. We're actually renewing our brain. It's part of it. I believe 100% that renewal is part of his plan. Yeah. That child's brain also has more mirror neurons. It's why children learn faster, and why that is so impactful on that young brain. So, mirror neurons are like you see a batter getting hit with a ball and you flinch. Those are mirror neurons at work. It helps you feel whatever you see, it feels like you're doing it. So when you see a runner across the finish line, your heart races. So those all became very impactful for that young brain. And now we have to do some considerable work with an older brain who's traveled with that repetition over time, creating neural pathways that seek and desire pornography. And that brain has become very sensitive to anything that might lead them to pornography. It's also become desensitized. In other words, it's chasing the original high. What used to be exciting isn't exciting as exciting. So the brain wants something new and fresh. Dopamine loves novelty, something not seen before. Yeah. And so people say it's often said that pornography will take you places you never thought you'd go, do things you never thought you'd do, spend money you never thought you'd spend, harm people you never thought you'd hurt, pay a price that you never thought you'd pay. Because of that desensitization and that desire for more. So if you've expanded those pathways for different means of being excited by pornography, you have to understand that you've got some real work to do to form neural pathways. So if that means getting a flip phone so it's harder to get access to pornography, if that means having an ally that you call every day for 30 days, if that means going to a Samson Society meeting at samsonsociety.com, 30 days and 30 meetings, then you need to do what you need to do and get really serious. Do I really want this out of my life? or am I just going to be satisfied with the status quo?
It's good. So walk me through, I see in the book that, I've heard of the term used a lot, accountability partner, but you've chosen a different word, ally. And so is that with intention? Is it the same thing? Is it different? Where does the word ally come from? And what does that look like to be an ally?
Ally sounds a lot nicer.
It does. Doesn't it sound nicer?
Yeah, I'd rather have an ally than someone. Well,
an ally.
You did.
An ally has your back, right? An ally wants what your goals to be true. They want a vision. They look at your vision and say, I not only believe in your vision to be pornography free, I want to help you get there. I want to be your friend to do this well. An accountability partner, I don't think it's a wrong word.
Sure.
But it's just been, accountability has been one of those words that's been really corrupted, in that hold someone accountable. We never think about an accountability in our general sphere. I'm going to hold someone accountable as, oh, they really care about me, right?
Well, when you hear about that at work, like, I'm going to hold you accountable, it's like punishment.
Yeah, right. So it doesn't sound very friendly.
On your side, like rooting for you. It's like, oh crap, I didn't finish this project. I was supposed to have due. Right.
An ally is someone that I can trust with my deepest fears, my deepest hurts, my deepest histories, what I'm struggling with today. And they're not there to bash me or tell me how bad I'm doing. They're there to support me and help me take one step at a time through a process that they know that I'm really struggling hard with this. I don't want this in my life. And so that ally relationship is really one that becomes, what's the proverb say? There's a man of many friends, but there's one who sticks closer than a brother. That's what an ally should be for you.
That's good. So in the book, you mention that the ally section, that you would recommend a spouse not be an ally. And, we've talked a lot about teenagers and kids and early exposure. And obviously there's real issue there, but let's get real. Many adults struggle with this too, many married adults. And so I'm just curious, like, why is that? Any research or study to back that up? I mean, if that is the case, like, what is the role of a spouse then in the regard to fight against pornography, to find freedom?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot packed in there. Right. There's a lot packed in there, because often the spouse is hurting, but gets very little help from the church. Often the spouse is ignored by everybody, and he or she is saying, man, I'm the one that's being betrayed here. I feel insecure in my relationship. He or she has been watching pornography and maybe in chat rooms, or maybe this has gone even into an affair, and other things have happened, or one night stands, whatever is going on. And those are big feelings and big hurts of betrayal in their life. And they need some support as well. Now, it doesn't affect every spouse in the same exact way. I'm not trying to say it does, but here's what I think about when it comes to a spouse should have a role to say in who an ally should be for the other. My wife might say, hey, I might say, hey, Jim, I think would be a great ally. And she goes, no way. He is just a good old boy. He always has your back. That's not the way it's going to be. Yeah. How about Zach? Zach is someone I can trust too. Zach, you're not getting a lot of help over there.
I know. It's, I give the guy a beautiful jacket.
I bought
it. But Zach, you pointed out the jacket, right?
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
Yeah. You should get that jacket.
Do you notice?
That's what a real ally would do.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Hey, Sam, do you ever notice this? This is what I get a lot. And maybe I like the guy justifies it, so he'll be like, my wife hasn't been affectionate for 6 months. I mean, I don't want to cheat. So, they justify it and they try to rationalize it as it's better than
the alternative. Yeah.
the alternative. And, I'm like, it's still not the answer, pal. Like, I that's what I've noticed. Like, they'll come to me with guilt, right? And then immediately the guilt switches to justification as to why they're doing it.
And blame.
Yeah, totally. Blame.
And minimizing.
Yes, it's not that big of a deal.
And lying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So
do you think they believe that, or I don't know. It's tough when, they come to you and they're, they feel like semi-repentant, like they know they're disgusted by what they do, but then immediately they start minimizing and justifying and
I think it's hard, especially if this is, we have not created a lot of authenticity often in our relationships in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Often the church is a place that we want to look good, and it's become institutions of respectability rather than a hospital where the great physician can do his work.
Right.
And when we, this has been found true even in counseling, where people lie to the person that they're paying. Right? You're going to see a counselor, you're paying them to see them, and people are lying to them. And I talk about this in the book. So why is that happening? They don't want you to look at them or think as badly. I don't want you to think badly about me.
Right.
I don't want you to know how just bad it hurts. I don't want you to know how bad it's been. I don't want you to know how long it's gone on. And often what happens, I've found as I mentor men, that when I tell my story first with authenticity, I become the safest person they know. And when I say, hey, when I was 10 years old, I was exposed to pornography and I didn't even understand the basic mechanics of sex. That I remember walking out of our home in Florida, and my brother standing there, who's 9 years older than me, and they were looking at a magazine sideways, and it didn't make any sense. And they flipped it around when I asked what they were looking at, and I'd never seen someone unclothed before. And even though I grew up in a Christian home, I didn't step away. I stepped forward because I was naturally curious. And I had a friend, and his dad had pornography that was stacked up in this closet with a shelf that was just packed tall. It looked sort of like a waterfall because it's kind of piling over, and there was a pile of it on the floor, and I could take anything I wanted, and I did. And pornography would follow me through middle school to high school and to college, and I ended my marriage. And it was only through a safe place in a safe church where I learned that pornography could be addictive and compulsive, and that was a great relief. It meant that evolution didn't make me this way, because I'd become almost agnostic in this. That God didn't make me this way, and I didn't have to stay this way. But I would repeatedly go to pornography, see things I never wanted to see, do things I never wanted to participate on online. And I want you to know that I know what it's like to walk this. Now, not everybody can say that, right? But we've all had something in our lives that we've used to anesthetize our emotions and our feelings and regulate our moods. And that's become not always a stronghold, but we've struggled in some way. And reassuring them and saying, listen, I want you to know that what you're going to say is, we're not going to put anybody in harm, but I want us to be honest with each other. I want you to create some honesty in your marriage. And we may have to take first one step at a time here, but we're going to find some real authenticity together. Would you be willing to walk with me on that? Because that authenticity builds an intimate connection that is contagious and empowering. And within a safe place, people hear you're a person and not a problem. And your identity is found in Christ and not in your sin. So often people enter this process, and I encourage you to use a process through Covenant Eye has many resources for this, as well as Pure Desire and Be Broken and other organizations that provide great tools that you can use. And I outlined those in the book. And when they go through that process, when they really go through that discipleship, where they learn to be honest, then they come out on the other side excited. They go on fire for Christ. They become that when we disciple, we create disciples, and those disciples create other disciples. I saw that through every church that was doing this work well, that every pastor said, I don't do more work now. I do less.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just saying. So you've mentioned that a couple of times. The difference between some churches that are doing it well and some churches that aren't doing it well. Yeah. What's the major difference between a church who is walking along somebody that's struggling with this and doing it well, as opposed to not doing it well? Is it simply the church that's not doing it well is shaming those people, or what? What's the difference?
7% of churches do anything at all to help.
7% do something to help?
7% of churches do anything at all to directly address pornography in the church.
Most just aren't. Yeah. That's the biggest problem. Is most
93. So the biggest problem is most people do nothing.
It's, again, we talked about, hey, can I really talk about this? I have a pastor in my neighborhood, and he said, "Hey Sam, I was walking my dogs, and he's driving by, and he says, 'Hey Sam, I want you to know I was at a regional pastors conference, and one of my pastors in my denomination held up your book and said, 'Hey, have you seen this?' And he goes, 'Oh yeah, in fact, I know the guy who wrote it.' He goes, 'Oh, should we be talking about this in the church?'"
Yes.
Yes, that's what he said too. Thank you for repeating that, Chris. Yeah. So one, we need to lean in because we've been so afraid, and let's face it, our congregations haven't been so nice to pastors who want to talk about these issues either.
It's true.
I was speaking to a pastor, and he said, "Now listen, Sam, I want you to understand something where you're asking me to begin teaching about the issues of pornography, be training my parents and other things. Listen, I said the word prostitute while I was reading scripture, talking about Rahab. I was reading scripture. Right. It used the word prostitute, and I got bawled out by members of my congregation for saying
that too. Yeah.
Right. So we need to tell our congregation to grow up a little bit too, and they need to understand just how just how impactful this is to the church.
Right.
It's not like they didn't know what the word meant. Right. So what I tried to spell out for the local church, how can we do this well? What are some first steps you can do? And so I broke this down based on what we had seen other churches begin in their work, and we created what I call easy steps. Maybe you may even want to call the easy button. The easy steps where it becomes a very handoff. You're aware of resources that are available to hand in the moment.
Yeah.
From those people, you often find that becomes one of the first folks as they're being discipled to become your next leader, your next discipler, right? But that's a first easy handoff. And then I break it down to small lifts, medium lifts, and large lifts. And one can build on top of the other. But a big part of that, those I outlined that very well in the book. It's too long to talk about here.
Cool.
But part of that, as well as some other chapters, talk about how the pastor can create culture.
Yeah.
Because he needs some allies below him in the congregation to help support this initiative. But if someone in the congregation a layperson is trying to do it, they'll reach a ceiling. They'll only get so far without a pastor, ministry leader who's saying, hey, I'm on board with this, and I'm going to not just be permissional. I'm not just going to give you permission to do this work. I'm intentional. And now that ceiling rises where more men, more women, more teens say, oh, this is safe. I can actually talk about what I've been struggling with. And so we create those safe places within the church, and they just begin to continue to grow. And suddenly you can actually have a safe church instead of just a safe pocket.
So if I understand you correctly, it's not like you're doing a 4-week sermon series on pornography, but you're saying maybe from the pulpit, hey, we understand this is a problem. And we also understand that it's kind of sensitive. Like if you're struggling with this, I want you to email me. I want you to talk to me, because we're kind of forming a group where we're really walking through that. I mean, I know I'm going to read your book here, The Healing Church.
Yes. Thank you.
But Is that what I'm hearing, or am I off on this?
Well, that is one among these steps. And
Okay.
again, it takes a lot to really outline everything that church can do. And
Yeah.
it's going to be dependent on your congregation. Where are you at?
Right.
So that's why there's some nuance to all of that. But I also recently met with a team in Atlanta, and we began, okay, so we map it out pretty well within the Healing Church, how you can begin taking these steps to create culture and create safety,
Cool.
where safety grows.
Okay.
But I'm breaking it down even further as an addendum to the book that should be coming out. I'm thinking my hope is to have it available in September, where it
is so that called the More Healing Church? What are you doing?
And what we did was break it down like just baby step stuff.
Oh, cool. Great. Cool.
Right. So to make it even easier.
Awesome.
But I think it's imperative that we think about our church overall. Is it being safe? Is it also calling us to a higher purpose? Because I see this on a spectrum, and on one side of the spectrum it's a very safe church. It's okay to come as you are. You're just not challenged to follow Christ.
Right.
On the other side, if you're a Christian, you shouldn't have any problems. On the other side of that spectrum, you should just be, once you're a Christian, all things are made new. Right. And if you have any problems, then maybe you don't love God.
Yeah.
Maybe you're not filled with the Holy Spirit. Maybe there's like a number of things, depending on your theology, what might be the issue with you.
It's like Job's friend coming to him. Like, what did you do? What sins did you commit?
Right. And what we need is a safe place with a safe process where people can lean in and find the healing and support that they need.
Sam,
it's okay to come as you are, but it's not okay to stay as you are.
Amen. Because we're a hospital. We improve. We get better.
Come on.
Sam, I'm curious. You've been in this field for 18 years, working with Covenant Eyes, and edited a ton of books. You've now written your own. Was there one thing that, even in the midst of your almost couple of decades into this, that like just surprised you, or that you just kind of had to do a double take or think about?
Oh, here was one. I sort of figured that my struggle was different from everybody else's struggle. And I had a counselor say this to me. He said, food and sex are among the most difficult addictions because we need food and we are sexual beings. And you can stop using alcohol or drugs, but sex and food are issues that must be tempered and redeemed and renewed. And that was eye-opening for me, and I found that many people don't think of, and so I had another church leader. She actually does work with food addiction, and she texted me one day and says, "Don't you think that food addiction and porn addiction are very similar?" I said, "Indeed. In fact, you're not the first one to say that to me." Yeah. So that was a little bit of surprise for me.
But one of those is not culturally, you're not going to get in trouble for it. And
that's right.
Looked down upon. Yeah. Or at least in the church.
But maybe it creates a little more empathy for why people are struggling in the same way that people are struggling with food to anesthetize their emotions.
Yeah.
They're doing the same thing with pornography.
Right.
Yeah. So Sam, we ask all of our guests this final question. This is a podcast ultimately to challenge people to be greater disciples, wherever they are. And so if you could challenge our listeners with one thing that they could do practically this week to be a greater disciple, what would you challenge?
I got it. Stop watching porn. All right. Have a good night.
See ya.
See you later.
I think part of it is to be the friend you would like to have. Be the disciple to someone else that you would like to have in your own life. And that doesn't mean you have everything figured out. In fact, you might be struggling right now. So part of that is being open and honest and testing who might be a safe person for you to talk to. And then you might discover that they have some struggles of their own too. And not to be satisfied with where you're at, but to then we if we're going to be discipled, we need to hear God's word. We need to understand how it can impact our lives. We need that safe process that really helps us lean in instead of being satisfied with the status quo.
Love it. Awesome. Listeners, if you take on that challenge this week to be the friend that you wish you had for somebody else, let us know. Hashtag Red Letter Disciple. We want to be praying for you. Are you going to do that for me? Wow, it's about time. But I think there's beauty in that, Sam, because with this particular issue, it's amazing how the devil lies, where people can get stuck in this and can have lustful thoughts and fall into this and think that they're alone. And it's you are so not even close to being alone in this. Yeah. So many people struggle. Right. And one of the best things we can do is bring it to light, talk about it.
And it's embarrassing, right? Like, unless you have an authentic relationship with somebody, you're not just going to go up to them and say, wow, I'm really struggling with porn, man. Yeah,
I wouldn't suggest that as an opener. But anyway, Sam, you've been a real blessing. Where can people find out more about you and the Healing Church?
Yeah, go visit thehealingchurch.com and you can download the first chapter for free. And then if you'd like to buy the book, you can buy the book wherever you buy books online.
There you go.
Cool.
I love it. Thehealingchurch.com. We'll put that in the show notes as well. I want to thank you, Sam, for leading an important conversation, and a conversation that many avoid, and that I know is going to bring the light of Christ to a lot of people's dark situations. And you can have light after darkness, and you can overcome, and you can find freedom. And your episode today really is going to help a lot of people.
Yeah, thank you so much, Sam.
Appreciate you, man, and hope you get some sleep on the rest of book launch week, and you go on a great vacation next week. All right,
Amen. That sounds great. Thank you.
God bless you, bud. Thanks.
God bless you.
Well, you heard it, folks. Not only was Sam incredibly helpful in helping us on our journey to freedom, but I also just turned into an old man, going into my 40s. Lord help me. Hey, we had a lot of fun. If you want to get to know Sam more, or our sponsor, which was the Forgiving Challenge, check out redletterpodcast.com. We've got links for the Healing Church, for a lot of things that Covenant Eyes is doing, and of course, for helping you pastors go deeper in finding freedom in your church through Forgiving Challenge. If you like this podcast, if it's helpful, we truly would love for you to give us a 5-star rating and review. That goes a long way in helping get the word out so we can help others. Next week, we have a really great guest. His name is Patrick O'Connell. He is the global director of New Thing, an awesome organization that catalyzes church movements across the globe. So he's got a really good sort of landscape on what's happening in Christianity and discipleship around the nation and the world. And we're going to talk with Patrick about what it does look like to be a disciple in America today, what we can learn from disciples overseas, and changing the scorecard for what's important in living out our lives as Jesus followers today. Super helpful conversation. Don't miss it. You don't miss it when you subscribe or follow wherever you're listening or watching to the podcast. With all that said, we'll see you back for next week on the Red Letter Disciple. Have a great 4th of July.